Hello and welcome to the Truth About Storytelling. This is Tyrene Martinson. I am a poet, podcaster, author, and a Christian. While in my past episodes of this podcast, I have only spoken about my faith occasionally, in this next month, I will be talking about it quite a bit more because I have dedicated the month of September for my podcast to be all about reflections on my trip to Mongolia, which was a mission trip. I will also have some fun facts about Mongolia and do some episodes that are primarily about that, and I'll have some episodes that are all about writing prompts. So for the month of September, I will be doing a minimum of 3 episodes a week. Some of them will be longer, some will be shorter, but I am going to be talking all about Mongolia and my experiences there, what I learned, what I loved, what I struggled with, and how it has shaped me as a writer and how it has shaped me as a Christian and how I see it really changing my life on a daily basis, which has kind of surprised me because I've taken other trips before. So having a singular trip change me is a little remarkable. It's definitely different than my other experiences. And while I will say that travel always shapes and changes us, each experience we have shapes and changes us to some extent, I feel like this trip changed me a little deeper and in ways that I'm still kind of discovering as I go along and go about my day after day. Now, I'm recording this episode a little bit early for the week, and I'm hoping that I can kind of get ahead with recording episodes. I'm not quite in my usual spot, so I'm hoping that the sound quality is still clear. So again, for the whole month of September, I will be talking about Mongolia and reflecting on my experiences there. In October and November, I will be primarily talking about fantasy writing and the Darkblade trilogy. I will be mentioning fantasy and the Darkblade trilogy throughout September as well, but again, the emphasis will be on Mongolia and reflecting on the experiences there before I move into a 2-month reflection on writing fantasy and on the Darkblade trilogy. In December, I will be focused on faith and holiday themes. And in January, I will be talking about habits, attitudes, and goals as we start the new year. Yes, I'm looking way ahead. I'm giving you my whole plan for the next 5 to 6 months. In February of 2026, I will be doing a short bit on my love of Old English literature and why I love it so much. And then in March of 2026, I'll be talking about fantasy and poetry. So now you know what I'm kind of planning to do for the next 6 months. I plan to stick with those episodes. If I feel like I need to have an off-the-cuff episode about something else, I will do an extra episode. And so you'll be able to follow my plan all along for the next 6 months. And my hope is that this podcast is interesting, educational, inspirational, encouraging, and maybe even occasionally entertaining. And I don't mind laughing at myself, so please feel free to find some humor in the things that I do, my foolishness, and in life. So again, this month I'm dedicating to reflections on my trip to Mongolia. And I have to say that my first impressions, at least the ones that I wrote in my journal, are kind of humorous because I was so tired. I have everything from the minutia of like, I have a headache, or there's, I'm weary and I really need to drink more water, and things like that. I wrote down the names of the films that I watched on the plane, and I highlighted the things I really liked about flying Korean Air, which totally blew me away. They are a great airline. They have great service, and I was super impressed by them. However, they were flying into Seoul, Korea, and I'm not sure if they were just preparing us for the heat and the humidity, but the only complaint I would have about that plane ride is I was overly warm the entire ride, and I was amazed. There were other people on the plane actually wearing sweaters, but I was really, really warm, like way too warm, and the blanket and pillow they provided were not really necessary because I was quite warm. But the food was excellent. The bathrooms were always clean, which is awesome. Thank you, Korean Air, for that. The flight attendants were incredibly kind and gracious, and the in-flight entertainment was great. I mean, it was a really good flight for an 11-hour flight, which does always feel extremely long when you're in economy class. And there's just simply no way to make that type of length of plane ride super, super fun. But, you do your best. And again, they did their best. It was really an excellent flight. And I appreciate all the hard work that they put into making their flights as comfortable as possible. So I will say that one of the movies that I watched was the Thunderbolts, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I wasn't sure I would. I don't know why, but some of the new Marvel and new DC movies have kind of left me feeling less interested. Like I'll watch the trailer and I'll think, well, maybe I want to see that. And I don't know, maybe it's because I've been disappointed in a few of the other Marvel movies. I've loved some and then went through a phase where I was just not quite happy with some of them. And then, so when this one came out, I thought, I don't know, do I really want to watch it? I'm not sure. It looks good, it looks funny, but then maybe I won't like it. I just wasn't sure. But I watched it on the plane, and it struck me as being different in a good way. And I really liked where they went with it as a whole. As a Christian fantasy writer, I appreciated the fact that they tackled a really tough subject area, and I think they did a pretty good job of it. Now, I'm not going to say that I agree with all things and how they handled that tough subject matter, but I really appreciated that they did tackle it, and they did so with a loving and gracious outcome. And I think that love and grace are always from God. And I know that there are Christians out there that could argue with me about that, but I think that all goodness comes from God because God is good. And God is good all the time. And when we're creative, when humanity is creative, when we are good to each other, when we are truly good to each other, then I think that God is at work, even in people who don't know him. And again, you definitely argue with me about that. I am not saying that eternal salvation is guaranteed by, someone's act of kindness or anything like that. I'm not trying to get into karma. Don't agree with that. I do believe that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, and we need him and a relationship with him for our eternal salvation. But when we see good going on, I think we need to praise it. And I really appreciated, again, the way that Thunderbolts handled a really tough bit of subject matter. And they did it in an entertaining way that was interesting and completely different than I expected. I don't know what I was expecting exactly from the film, but it wasn't what I got. And I liked it. So anyhow, I don't know if you will like it if you watch it, but I know that I did. And it was one of the films that I watched on the plane. Now, of course, when I was young, we didn't have as much for in-flight entertainment, and so I grew up reading books on the plane. So I always have a book with me on the plane, but I didn't read my book that I brought with me. And I did write my journal, but it's just in little tiny jots and bits about the movies I watched, about what we ate, what I liked about the service on the airlines, what I thought about sitting at the airport in Seoul, Korea, and how amazed I was by how efficient the airport in Seoul, Korea is. Although, if you're traveling through Seoul, Korea, and you are in Incheon Airport and you're jumping onto another flight, have your passport ready because you will be using it to transfer. You're going to go through a security check and you'll need your passport then. You are going to be getting onto a train probably to move from terminal to terminal, and you'll need your passport then, and you might need your passport a third time. So if you are traveling through Incheon Airport, beautiful airport, highly efficient, but you definitely need your passport out if you are traveling there. So just be prepared for that. We were pretty tired and struggling to figure out what we were doing when we were going through there. But one of the things that I really loved about the team of people I went with is that we kind of slowly figured out how we could all work together, and everyone was kind and gracious and patient, even when maybe we weren't always feeling patient, but we all kind of slowed down and we're like, okay, let's make sure we're all okay. And we were, and then we kept going. And so very loving people, and I'm thankful that I got to go with that particular team of people. It was really good. So on the way there, I was traveling with 3 other people from my church named Peter, Matt, and Mia. And the four of us did pretty well together. Again, we were kind of sorting out how we worked together, but I think we did really well on those 2 legs of the journey. And when we got to Ulaanbaatar, which I still am struggling to say correctly, Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, which is, I think, the largest city in Mongolia. It's also the coldest capital city in the world. That's one of the fun facts that I've already shared about Mongolia. It's true. And we flew in, and it was August, so it wasn't that cold then. And we, stumbled out of the plane, kind of sorted ourselves out and got our luggage, which was quite a lot of luggage because we each had an extra large suitcase filled with items to give away that we had been given by generous people from our church and community to give to people in Mongolia when we got there. So anyway, we got to the airport, we got our luggage, and we stumbled out, and we were greeted by these beautiful, beautiful smiling faces of Pastor Sheikha, his wife Haka, who has a medical ministry, and our fellow mission team member Dave, who came from a church in California and who I previously didn't know. So it's my first time meeting Dave. He's a really nice man. He was Peter's youth ministry director or youth pastor when Peter was in high school. And Peter is actually Pastor Peter of my church. But he is going to be transitioning to a different type of work with a Christian publishing company. So while he will always be a pastor, I think that because he will no longer be my pastor in a month or two, I'm kind of transitioning my own way of speaking to him and about him with like Pastor Peter or Peter. Like I'm trying to figure that out to honor his transition and the work that he's going to be doing for a publishing company and the work he's doing as an author and potentially as a game designer. He's been a game designer before, but he's playing around with a new game, and I'm kind of excited to see what happens. So I'm kind of going off there a little bit, but so we have Pastor Peter, again, author, Christian musician, and previous game developer, and Matt, who is a former journalist who now works with a immigration group to help settle people and help people find their way in America. And Mia, who is an accountant, but she's also on the leadership team of our church. I think actually Matt is too. They're both on the board of elders, and she's on the praise team. We are all on the podcast team of One Hope Church and enjoy doing those episodes. And then Dave, who is a former youth pastor who is retired, but he does quite a bit of mission work and mission travels. So very deeply Christian people, deep Christian leaders, everyone else on the trip had been on a mission trip before, except for me. And I'm 54, which I know for most people is like kind of an old age to be going on a first mission trip. But I was very excited. And again, we were greeted by Dave and Sheikha, Pastor Sheikha and Haka, his wife. And they were so kind and wonderful and enthusiastic. And they brought us out to their cars out in the parking lot. We loaded up all of these suitcases, just massive number of suitcases, into their 2 SUVs, and then we drove about an hour into the capital city at night. There still was traffic at 11 o'clock at night, and they dropped us off at our hotel, which is called May 7, which is actually a date with some meaning in Ulaanbaatar's history. And I can't remember what it is right now. I need to look at my notes. Give me just a moment. All right, I'm back. I had to check some notes before I said too much more about May 7. So we stayed at the May 7 hotel, and May 7 holds significance in Mongolia as both a socialist and a democratic date. So on May 7th, 1921, there was establishment of the Mongolian People's Republic. And during that time, the Soviet government really overtook Mongolia, and it was a communist state. But in 1990, on May 7th, they held their first democratic elections in Mongolia and were no longer a communist state. So it's a day of transition for Mongolia politically in history, and I think it's kind of interesting that there's a hotel named May 7. And so that's where we stayed, and it was in the heart of Ulaanbaatar, and I still am saying I'm emphasizing things wrong, just so you know. I think I need to shorten the last syllable if I was saying correctly. So the reason we stayed there and the reason Pastor Sheikha and Haka found it for us is because it was close to where they live in their apartment, and so that we would only have to walk to their apartment and not have to drive back and forth across the city, which has extremely bad traffic. And what was interesting is we were on one of the major streets of the city in that hotel. There were not very many traffic lights, and people will literally take 3 to 5 point type U-turns in the middle of the road just to get to where they need to go. And there's just a lot of traffic. And the government has tried to cut down on the traffic by having drivers only drive on certain days based on the last digit of their license plate numbers. So if they have an even number license plate, they can drive on certain days, and odd number license plate, they can drive on other days. And so again, they've tried to really cut down on the traffic issues, but they haven't quite resolved it yet. And so I'm sure that they are going to continue to do creative work on that and try to figure that out. But it is a huge capital city. 1.5 or 1.6 million people live there. It is the largest city in Mongolia. And as I said before, it's the coldest capital city in the world. It isn't just about the latitude and the longitude or about the elevation of the city. It also has to do with the Arctic winds that come down from the north and sweep across Mongolia when it is wintertime. We were there when it changed seasons. This isn't really a first day impression, but so when we got there, it was August. It was summery and nice and very, it's 70 degrees, which I'm from Washington State. That sounds great to me. It was good. It was good weather. And we left on September 3rd, and on September 4th, it was supposed to snow. So that kind of gives you an idea how much the temperature changed while we were there. And really what changed, even though we went from 70 degrees high, a 70 degree Fahrenheit high every day to a 60 degree Fahrenheit high every day, what happened was the wind changed. And all of a sudden we were getting these winds from the north right at the beginning of September. And there was definitely a difference in temperature because of the wind chill. And Even though the sun may have been giving us 60-degree temperature, the wind chill brought it down to 40 pretty quickly. And so I would say that's probably why it's the coldest capital city in the world, and not just because of elevation, not just because of latitude, but because of that Arctic wind that sweeps through there. So it's a big, busy capital city. It was run by the Russian Communist government for 70 years, or nearly 70 years, and so you see some old communist style buildings there, and old structures, as well as newer structures, and it's got very much a modern city type vibe. But on the outskirts there are gurs, which most people in the Western world say yurts when they describe the type of building I'm talking about. They say yurt, but yurt is actually a Russian word. So Mongolians currently use the word gur, which is a Mongolian word for the type of felt walled tent that a gur is. It's almost like an igloo shape, and they're typically white on the outside, and the walls are felt lined, and they have a singular hole in the ceiling, and they have a stove in the middle of the room. That's where the cooking is done. It's also where the main heat source is, and it's a single roomed place for people to live. They can be different sizes, but typically they house between 2 and 4 people, maybe comfortably, maybe not by Western standards, but fairly comfortably. They'll have kind of 2 separate sides to them. There's a woman's side and a man's side, and yes, that is still held to in the world today, in Mongolia today. So if you visit there and you're a woman and you walk into a gur, you need to turn to the right. And if you're a man, you need to turn to the left. Guests may sit in the center in the back facing the stove, or the host of the family may sit in the back in the center facing the stove. So, but again, women head to the right, men to the left. You should never step on the threshold or lean on any of the center poles or anything like that. They don't want you to lean on the structure because it is a movable structure. It's basically a tent with long poles and again a felt outer structure. But people live in them all year long in Mongolia. On the outskirts of Ulaanbaatar, there are neighborhoods of gurs, and throughout Mongolia, in cities and towns and in the open landscape where the herding families will move from place to place fall to summer for good grazing, they live in gurs all year round, and even though it's very, very cold there, so, or it can be very cold there in the winter. But again, they're called gur or gurs and not yurts, because yurts is a Russian term. And Mongolia, while they want to maintain friendly relationships with Russia and China, who are their immediate neighbors, they are taking a great deal of cultural pride in their own language and in the products that they create. And so if you're in Mongolia today, you want to say gur and not yurt. And the word gur is actually synonymous with the word home. So it's both a description of the structure that some people live in, and it also means the word home. And so that's kind of something to think about if you ever get to travel to Mongolia, or if you're reading about Mongolia. The names have changed somewhat because they are celebrating their own culture and their own language. And so we were, again, in the main city for the first 2 or 3 days. And we had a really good time there, but we were also very tired, at least, especially I was. I wish I could say that I adjust really well in time schedule from one time zone to the next, but I really don't. Despite my love of travel, that had me so excited to jump on a plane for 11 hours on my birthday, which I would not say is usually an ideal sort of birthday celebration, except for the fact that I was like, I'm traveling, woohoo! Um, but 11 hours on a plane is a long time. 11 hours plus a 3-hour layover plus another 3 hours. Anyway, so we were in the city and we saw so many sights those first few days, but I was also very exhausted and struggling to sleep at the right time. So it was a bit of a blur at first, but I know I enjoyed being there. The first full day we were there, we went to Sheikh and Haka's apartment, and they fed us a traditional Mongolian beef stew that was divine. It was so, so good. And they were incredible hosts, and they showed us their beautiful 2-bedroom apartment and their pictures of their children, and they spoke about their ministry and showed us a video about Mongolia and talked about the ministry that they have, and kind of 2 different ministries really that work well together. Haka is a physical therapist who's worked with burn victims, but she's also worked with children, specifically pediatric physical therapy and occupational therapy. And she works for a clinic where they allow her to take time off to go with her husband on his church planting mission trips in the countryside of Mongolia. And so she both ministers to children as a physical therapist and occupational therapist, sharing her faith as she can with them and sharing her faith with other physical therapists and occupational therapists, supporting other doctors and dentists in a medical mission and ministry field within Mongolia. She is part of an organization of Christians within medical and dental fields that work together, and they bring their faith into their work. And I think it's very beautiful, and I'm really thankful to have met and to know Haka. She's just a beautiful lady. And Pastor Sheikha has been a pastor for many years. He started the City Vision Church in Ulaanbaatar, specifically in a specific neighborhood because they felt it was an unreached neighborhood, and they've really built up a great church. We were able to worship with them, and it was really fun and beautiful. But on that first day, he was sharing about his dream, his vision for ministry, and that's one in which he wants to build up the community of Christian churches throughout Mongolia. He wants to plant churches in smaller villages throughout Mongolia, and currently his focus is in the Zavkhan province. And so that's why we spent 3 days with them in Ulaanbaatar, and then we went to the Zavkhan province. So again, my initial impressions were a little bit of a blur because of how tired I was, but Ulaanbaatar is definitely a bustling, busy city. We went to see Chinggis Khan Square, which is the main square. And you may be saying, who is Chinggis Khan? Don't you mean Genghis Khan? No, I don't. I mean Chinggis Khan, because again, Genghis Khan is a westernization of Chinggis Khan's name. So if you've ever read about Genghis Khan in history, it's actually Chinggis Khan. So take away the G sound and replace it with the Ch sound, and you have a more correct name. And so the Chinggis Khan Square is a busy place. We were there on a day when many weddings were taking place because the Buddhist monks of Mongolia determine when Buddhists can get married, and there are certain days that they consider to be auspicious days of the year to get married, and so there were a lot of weddings taking place that day. Plus, there was a Japanese Mongolian festival going on where there were singers and dancers and cosplayers, and they were bringing their best to the place, and that was fun to watch and to hear. Mongolia has been and continues to be a diverse cultural place. because at one point in time, the Mongolian Empire stretched out across Europe and Asia and was one of the largest empires in the world. And so the Mongolian people are from a diverse background. And so you have Japanese Mongolians in Mongolia. And again, so they were having a festival, and that was fun to see and kind of maybe not really be a part of, but to witness. And we also went shopping that day, and it was a lot of shopping. I was not quite prepared to shop, but it was fun to go look around. We knew we wouldn't have an opportunity later, so we did our best to find what we could find. And that was kind of the first and second day we did things like that. And we had some fun and really got to know each other a little bit more as a team. We prayed with one another. We worshiped with one another. We shared ideas and things like that with one another. Pastor Peter talked about what he would talk about on the Sunday for worship, and we all had an opportunity to share for that too, and kind of practice music. Although we didn't really practice music, we talked about what songs we would sing, and we were not as prepared as we would like to have been on Sunday morning, but we did practice several times, and that was good. Now, I could talk quite a bit more in depth about how that Sunday went. There were, wow, just amazing moments in that worship experience. And it was very moving. And we met and prayed with people afterwards, and that was also very moving. The day before the worship, on Saturday, the day before worship on Sunday, we met with a medical and dental mission team and had lunch with them at a Chinese restaurant, and that was really fun and sweet. It was a good time, and I'm very thankful for that, and for that lunch, and for the people there, and how kind everyone was to me when I was very obviously tired. Very obviously tired. I wish I hadn't been, but I was. And they basically looked at me. They're like, "You need to go back and rest." And I was like, "Yes, I do." Because I was almost asleep at the table. So anyway, very kind and gracious people, very loving people. And worship on Sunday was phenomenal, beautiful. I didn't understand all the words that were said. The translator was awesome. But, and we had a woman who translated for my friend Mia and I. She sat near us and told us what was going on. But it was so, so beautiful to be in worship with people just in general, but also to worship together and sing songs that we all know, and sing in English and Mongolian, and go back and forth and sing together. That was just a wonderful thing. And being a part of that great community. And again, afterward, having lunch. Unfortunately, I got really tired at lunch, and I know I had an awkward, odd conversation that afterward I was like, why did I talk about that? I mean, if God can use that's great, but it was just an odd conversation that I felt like I may not have said all the right things, or it was kind of embarrassing, actually. So definitely had some awkward moments, as that, American really couldn't speak even the phrases I had tried to learn beforehand in Mongolian very well. And there were people translating, but again, I felt like I talked about all the wrong things at that lunch. I don't know why, but it just felt awkward. But there were good moments in the conversation too, and the people that I was talking to were very gracious and kind, and thankfully we could all agree on how much we loved our kids and our grandkids, and those are always good things to talk about. And I talked a little bit with a lady named Sky who teaches English there, and we shared a love of middle grade and young adult books, and that was great. But it was an interesting time, and I wish I could say that I spoke well and was amazing, but I can't say that. I just kind of was tired and awkward. And probably talked too much about certain things and didn't listen enough. But lesson learned. I I do know that I sometimes need to listen more, especially when I'm not sure of what to say. And that was just a kind of a reiteration of that lesson for me that day. But it was still really good. And again, people were gracious and kind and loving. And I'm glad that we were there. I'm glad we had that lunch. And afterward, we went back and rested a bit more because obviously I needed a lot of rest those first 3 days. And there's just so much. I don't even know how to capture all of what those first 3 days were like, but it was good, and it was also interesting and fascinating. There were so many things I felt like I learned, and I don't even know that I can like pull it all together. Um, our group had fun just walking around and going to a little convenience store near the hotel and finding this outdoor playground and playing around on it because we're big goofballs and kids at heart, and that was fun. And we enjoyed ourselves and again celebrated our mutual love for God together, and just the joy of being alive and being in a different place and discovering things about it. We did discover economically that the U.S. dollar is pretty powerful there. So things end up being less expensive for us than we initially thought they might be as far as food went. So we'd have a meal that here in the United States would probably cost each of us anywhere between $12 and $20. And we did the conversion, and it was like, oh, that cost each of us like maybe $3 to $5. It was really inexpensive, maybe $7. But I mean, like, it was really inexpensive for us there as American citizens with the conversion rate. And so it's kind of nice to know if you're traveling there. The US dollar currently is pretty strong, and you may not like be getting a good deal for tourists, but in that sense, you are traveling pretty inexpensively in Ulaanbaatar. So you can definitely get coffee there for an inexpensive price in US dollars. You can't find very much for alternative milks. Mongolia is definitely a meat-eating, milk-drinking type of place. Even if they had soy milk on the menu, that didn't necessarily mean it was available. And so that's something to kind of think about if you go there. Again, a lot of meat, a lot of milk, and I don't know if you could be a vegetarian in Mongolia very well, or you'd have to be very creative and bring some of your own food. So we all did bring some of our own snacks and food, but we were all game for experimenting and trying things as well. And I would say food is a little different in Europe and around the world. In America, we have a lot of genetically modified foods, which you can go back and forth on the benefits and the pros and cons of that. But I would say that I digest food better in Europe and in other parts of the world. Typically, I can handle milk products in Europe and in Mongolia a little bit better than I can here at home. I can eat ice cream there and I feel fine. If I eat ice cream here, I feel sick. So it really seems to make a difference to not have some of the ways that we process foods here when you're abroad. So something to think about if you have food restrictions and you're visiting Mongolia is that there are definitely different ways of eating there. And again, it's very meat centric and dairy centric. So that's just part of their way of life, and it is part of how they stay strong in those cold winters. So be prepared for that if you decide to travel to Mongolia. Also, you should know, you may be thinking, is Mongolia a big Christian place? She's talked about meeting these Christian people. Well, actually, in Mongolia, currently only 3% of Mongolia, only 3% of the population is Christian, and that's why there are these mission efforts. Now, mission efforts have been going on in Mongolia since the 1990s, but it's been very kind of haphazard. Some of the missionaries who've been there for a while have been burned out. Some churches have been built and then kind of disappeared. There's, again, been a lot of varied efforts. And so one of the reasons that my church really wanted to go on this mission trip and to meet up with Sheikh and Haka is not only because we had met them already because they'd visited the United States, but because we strongly believe in supporting missionaries who are in-country missionaries, who are of the country and know the country and understand the culture in ways that maybe we don't, no matter how hard we try. So Pastor Sheikha and Haka are both Mongolian. They have lived there their whole lives. They know their people. They know the language. They know the culture. And supporting them in their mission ministry to plant churches and to build up the Christian church in the Mongolia just seems smart. It just seems like the right way to do things, and actually lessening some of that thing that I don't know how to call it anything else, but the Western white savior stuff that I don't want to do. I don't want to be a part of that. And I don't know that most missionaries really, truly today want to be a part of that type of attitude, because I know that God created each and every person on the planet. When we had the Tower of Babel in the Old Testament, and cultures were spread across the world, and languages were were changed. God did that on purpose. There is a beauty in diverse cultures and understanding that cultures are different from each other, and it's okay. We can celebrate the culture of a place and the language of a place, and I don't think it's a good idea to force Western European or American ideas on a country that isn't those things. And I think it's possible to really praise God and to bring our faith into the world without getting into that icky American white savior thing. I don't think that's a healthy way of doing mission or ministry work. So that's my thoughts on that. And I don't want to be negative, because I think that most Christians who have gone into mission work of some kind or another truly do so because they love God and they feel loved by God and they want to share that love with other people. And so that was the heart of our mission team's presence there. And it was, I think it's the heart of Pastor Sheikha and Haka's ministry in their own country. We want to work with them and support them and encourage them in that ministry. And so that's why we went, to pray for and to celebrate the work that God is doing in Mongolia, and to worship with Mongolians and celebrate their language and who they are in their faith, without Americanizing it. So I hope that all this makes sense. I am giving you some big, long episodes about my impressions and about my trip to Mongolia. I'm getting fairly detailed. I'm not going to mention the names of all the people we met, only the people who I feel would be okay with that. And I am looking forward to sharing more. I felt like it was just such a huge trip and so meaningful to me. I was surrounded by people of faith the entire time, every single day for 2 weeks. People from my team that are people of phenomenal faith, people that we met like Pastor Sheikha and Haka, who are Mongolian people of incredible faith in Christ, other pastors, other believers, new believers, people who weren't sure about Christ yet, people who stepped forward and asked for prayer and who praised God for the freedom that they felt they received in Christ. And so I don't know how you can go through that type of experience without being changed, because it certainly changed me. And I'm so thankful for being able to go on that trip to Mongolia. And I hope that if you ever have a chance to step out in faith do something that maybe isn't comfortable all the time, and go with a team of people who are truly in love with God, then I highly recommend you do that, to go out and experience what it's like to practice your faith in action, even if that action doesn't seem like, quote, enough, like you didn't build a house or, you know, give medical care. Maybe all you do, like my team did, we went and we encouraged and we prayed and we worshiped. And I think those things are valuable too. So, again, I highly recommend you try going out on a mission trip, whether it's to Mongolia or some other place. I will be sharing more about my experiences in Mongolia next week, but the rest of the episodes this week will be 2 short episodes. One about just fun facts from Mongolia that will be fairly short, and then another one that will be about writing prompts and about writing for this week, because mainly this podcast is supposed to be about writing, but I am focused on Mongolia quite a bit for the next 4 weeks, and I want to make sure I have a short writing episode every week too. So thank you for joining me. This is Tyreen Martinson with the truth about storytelling and being a woman of faith.